Well, the new Congress starts work tomorrow. There is a stronger Republican majority in the House, a new majority in the Senate. President Obama calling on the FCC to impose the strongest possible rules on providers by classifying broadband as a utility, so-called net neutrality. So regulation would be increased, and some argue that's a step too far, and innovation will be stifled. Republican Congressman Marsha Blackburn is with us from Tennessee, as well as Wall Street Journal reporter Gautam Nagesh. Before we get to you, Congressman Blackburn, Gautam, I want to bring you in here because net neutrality, this is the concept that all traffic on the internet should be treated equally. So why and how has this definition become so politicized?
Yes, net neutrality is something that President Obama has supported for a long time. Since he was in the Senate, he ran on this, and in 2010, his previous FCC chairman passed a set of net neutrality rules. Those were tossed out by a federal court in last January, and that really precipitated this whole proceeding that we've undergone over the past year, which has become highly politicized. The current FCC chairman, Tom Wheeler, proposed a set of rules. Net neutrality advocates, people who believe in net neutrality, thought those rules did not go far enough. They began a really public campaign, which resulted at the end with the president weighing in the way he did, which was really unprecedented. And he called for, as you said, the strongest possible rules, including regulation as what we call a common carrier, a utility-like communication service.
So, Gautam, Google has a very odd role in this because essentially, for people who don't remember, it helped to kill net neutrality for wireless, but then rejoined the debate in the fall and saying, okay, it's about face. We oppose efforts by large internet providers to speed up or slow down or manipulate, basically, any speed of internet traffic. So how does Google's stance and its change really exhibit what's at stake here?
Sure. So in 2010, Google was very active in this debate, as you mentioned. They came out with a deal with Verizon that called for some net neutrality on traditional broadband networks, but none on wireless. A lot of folks in the net neutrality community really thought of that as a betrayal, and Google dealt with a big backlash. That could be part of the reason why this time Google has largely been on the sidelines. They have called for net neutrality rules on both wired and wireless broadband, which is the common position in Silicon Valley and among much of the internet industry. But on the other side, Google has not been as active as some of the smaller companies, startups like Tumblr and Kickstarter based in New York. These were some of the folks who were really pushing the White House to go with Title II, which is the utility common carrier portion of the Communications Act, and really strong rules. And so it's really been a coalition of folks who push for that. So
at this point, in its current stance, Google is now going against a company such as Verizon, just to make the point clear.
Yes, Verizon, Comcast, AT&T, Time Warner Cable, the largest broadband providers in the country, are all very much against common carrier regulations. They say that this would reduce the incentives for them to invest in their networks, and they generally believe that it would be a step too far in terms of regulatory overreach. The markets have had a sort of differing view on this. We saw some reduction in share prices, but not really as significant as was anticipated. So the markets seem to have made their peace with the prospect.
Gautam, we thank you very much. Excellent reporting. A Wall Street Journal reporter, Gautam Nagesh, joining us there. Well, you just heard Gautam sum up at least one particular point of view that Congressman Marsha Blackburn shares. I know, Congressman, you say the internet functions just fine as is. Government should stay out. Do you see the rules that the FCC is considering meant to basically keep these broadband providers that my colleague was just talking about from altering speed? You see that as damaging?
Of course, net neutrality rules would be damaging, and let me give you a couple of specifics. Gautam just mentioned what was happening with the previous net neutrality order that was there under Chairman Janikowski. Here's the specific. If you went into paragraph 84 of that order and read what it does to innovators, it basically says, hey, if you're going to attach an innovation to the broadband, you have to file with the FCC first. Now, I think if you went to Consumer Electronics Show, which is taking place in Las Vegas right now, and asked these innovators, do you want to go file with the federal agency first, the answer would be no. Another reason this is so damaging to the private sector is the tax taxes that it is going to put on your broadband providers, an estimate of $15 billion in new taxes that would come in through a Title II regulation.
That's a possibility. But I want to ask you, I mean, what about these backdoor deals that are being done anyway? Last year we talked a lot about, for example, Netflix working with Comcast. So in many ways there is already a fast and a slow lane, and companies are just working around the government stance.
It is called companies finding a way to transact business and not having the federal government mandating how they're going to transact business. Let's leave it to the private sector. If they want to work out a way to position themselves in the marketplace, then they're going to be able to do that. We do not need the federal government and the FCC taking control of broadband services and internet delivery through a reclassification. And what we don't want to see is the FCC usurping that authority so that they are assigning priority and value to content. If they're regulating the speed, they're regulating the delivery, then they're going to have the ability to make that assignment of priority and value.
What do you think about the argument, though, just to play devil's advocate? For example, Google has Eric Schmidt living and working in D.C. All of these large companies can afford lobbyists. They can afford offices and time, resources in D.C. What about smaller companies that are trying to innovate that may not have the same size dog in the race?
Well, I talk to those innovators every single day. In Nashville, we have lots of them. The Entrepreneur Center is full of young people that are working on the next best innovation. They do not want to have to fool with another federal agency. They do not want additional taxes. They don't want additional paperwork, and they don't want to have... They would rather have the opportunity to construct a deal on their own without the federal government coming in and saying, we're taking control of this. We're going to apply 1930s utility rules to the internet. The internet's not broken. It doesn't need it. The FCC needs to get out of the way and let innovation take place.
Well, as some people have pointed out, in fact, that the internet itself is a loophole. Congresswoman, thank you very much for joining us there.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Right there from Capitol Hill, Congressman Marsha Blackburn, of course, from Tennessee.